Most birds that eat fruit are active during the day. Colour vision makes it easy to spot ripe fruit amongst the leaves, so foraging after dark seems like an impossible strategy. Yet, hidden among the forests and mountains of northern South America lives one bird that has done exactly that. The oilbird, Steatornis carapensis, ranges from Bolivia north to Trinidad and Tobago. By day, it roosts deep inside caves. By night, it emerges to search the rainforest for fruit, making it the world's only nocturnal fruit-eating bird capable of sustained flight. At first glance, this lifestyle seems almost impossible. How does a bird find fruit in the darkness? Why spend its days hidden inside caves? And what adaptations make this extraordinary lifestyle possible? Oilbirds have always been an evolutionary puzzle. Today, they are in their own order, the Steatornithiforms. But for the longest time, scientists did not know where to place them on the wider family tree. They were originally put alongside the nightjars and Caprimulgiforms. The two groups have many similarities, being nocturnal birds with similar body shapes. In fact, they are part of a large clade of birds that are mostly active at night. Scientists still disagree on the exact relationships between the species in this group, but the current understanding is that the nightjars were the first to branch off. These are nocturnal ground-nesting birds, known for their short legs and beaks. The oilbird is next, alongside its closest living relatives, the patoos. Known for their upright posture and large yellow eyes, patoos are only found in South and Central America. Frogmouths look like Australia and Southeast Asia's version of the patoo. Their name comes from their large, flattened beaks that can open extremely wide for their size. Next are the owlet nightjars, more closely related to frogmouths than to either owls or nightjars. They are nocturnal birds from New Guinea and Australia, and are fairly small insectivores. The final group is the only diurnal one. This is the apodiforms, with the swifts, tree swifts, and hummingbirds. So, when looking at the group as a whole, what stands out the most? Perhaps the first thought would be the apodiforms, since all the other orders are nocturnal. Yet, there is another branch of this family tree that broke almost every rule. While most of its closest relatives hunt insects under the cover of darkness, the oilbird took an entirely different evolutionary path. Instead, it became the only nocturnal, flying fruit specialist bird. The kakapo from New Zealand is also a nocturnal fruit-eating bird, but is famously flightless. Rather than picking fruit like most birds, oilbirds swallow many fruits whole, using the remarkable wide gape of their beak before later regurgitating or passing the seeds intact. It is not common for nocturnal birds to eat fruit, as most birds have highly developed colour vision that allows them to easily find fruit and determine whether it is ripe. This is why almost all frugivorous birds are active during the day, like hornbills, toucans, or pigeons. But not the oilbirds. They forage at night. To do this, they need a very different set of skills. Oilbirds have a keen sense of smell, enabling them to find food across long distances. Despite what many people think, birds do have a sense of smell. But in most species, it is not a particularly developed sense. But there are birds that heavily rely on smell. Turkey vultures, kiwi, and albatrosses, among others. The oilbird can use smell to track down and identify fruiting trees, and to tell the difference between ripe and unripe fruit. This keen sense of smell is supported by an unusually large olfactory bulb, packed with dense networks of receptor cells that maximize their sensitivity to airborne chemicals. They also have the highest density of rod cells in the eyes of any known vertebrate, allowing them to see incredibly well in low-light conditions. Unlike other land animals, an oilbird's rod cells are stacked vertically in 3 distinct tiers. This unique layered structure is otherwise only found in deep-sea fish living in the ocean's midnight zone. Their pupils can also dilate much further than most other animals, further specializing them for nighttime vision. Such extraordinary low-light sight does come with some trade-offs. Because their retinas have so many rods, they have no room for cone cells, and so have surprisingly few of them. Cone cells are the structures responsible for color and sharp details. As a result, their view of the world is an ultra-bright, blurry black and white image. But as they are only active at night, this trade-off must be worth the benefit of being able to see in darkness. Despite their incredible smell and unique eyesight, those are not the senses oilbirds are well known for. They are instead known for being one of the few birds capable of echolocation, the ability to navigate using sound. Unlike mammals, which have independently evolved echolocation multiple times in groups like dolphins, bats, or shrews, very few birds have ever developed it. Aside from oilbirds, the only other avian examples are two genera of swiftlets found in the Indo-Pacific that roost deep in caves. Echolocation in birds is relatively crude and basic, especially when compared to mammalian specialists like bats or dolphins. Oilbirds use their voice box to produce click-like bursts of sound. Their voice box is specially adapted to perform this function. It has specialized muscles to actively contract to rapidly interrupt the airflow, allowing the sound to be released in tiny bursts, less than 10 milliseconds long. This is important, as it prevents the clicks from blurring together, allowing the bird to clearly hear the returning echoes. The sound is very low frequency, low enough that it can be clearly heard by humans. Compare this to bats, for example, whose ultrasonic sounds are mostly outside of human hearing. This is the reason bird echolocation is often described as rudimentary. Because the clicks are relatively low in frequency, they provide much less detail of the surroundings. So, while many species of bats can use their echolocation to pinpoint and capture flying insects, oilbirds do not have that level of accuracy. Instead, their echolocation is only good enough to create an acoustic map of massive structures. However, with the oilbird's lifestyle, they don't actually need echolocation with pinpoint accuracy. They eat fruit, not insects, and as we've already covered, they have excellent smell and eyesight specifically adapted for darkness. This may raise the question of why they need echolocation at all. And, well, they don't need it when outside. Instead, they use the echolocation almost exclusively in caves. Oilbirds often roost and nest in cave systems, only leaving under the cover of darkness to forage for food. It doesn't matter how good their night vision is, it is useless in caves. Vision requires some amount of light. Even the oilbird cannot see in pitch darkness. They are just adapted to make the most of the least amount of light possible, but they do still require at least some light. And in caves, there is no source of light. So echolocation was the oilbird's response to this very specific problem. They use it to avoid stalagmites and not flying into the walls. Outside caves, they instead rely on their vision. Oilbirds have a fourth, highly important way to sense the world. These are the whisker-like feathers around the base of their beak. These are much more than simple feathers. They are packed with specialized, vibration-sensitive mechanoreceptors. Similar to mammalian whiskers, these provide close-range sensory feedback, working alongside echolocation in caves and vision in dense forests. They likely detect vibrations from airborne noises, helping to supplement the bird's echolocation and other senses when maneuvering through dense vegetation and cave passages. Oilbirds nest and raise their chicks in caves, but it was not until 2009 that we learnt that non-breeding birds often roost in the forest. Before that, it was assumed oilbirds never saw the sun. Non-breeding oilbirds only spend about a third of their days in caves. The rest of the time they roost in the forest. Interestingly, those roosting in the forest are far less active at night than the ones in caves. Researchers suggest this reflects the different challenges of living in these two different environments. Those in the forest are more exposed to predators, so reducing activity makes them less likely to be noticed. On the other hand, those in caves face greater competition from other oilbirds, so require more energy. Oilbirds are colonial nesters, forming groups from a few dozen pairs to thousands. The largest known oilbird colony is in Cueva del Guacharo National Park in Venezuela, with an estimated 10 to 18,000 birds. Guacharo is actually the Spanish word for oilbird, so both the cave and the national park are named after them. In caves, oilbirds stack their nests side by side on rocky ledges. Space is often limited, so the nests are placed very close to each other. They create hardened, cone-shaped mounds using a paste of regurgitated fruit pulp, seeds, and their own droppings. Oilbirds maintain highly complex, intense, and vocal social lives. Because thousands of individuals pack themselves onto tiny cave ledges. Their entire social system is built around managing high-density living and coordinating group flights. Oilbirds are exceptionally loud. Inside a crowded colony, they communicate using an array of harsh, piercing screams, squawks, and snarls. In an enclosed cave, this cacophony of sound creates a deafening acoustic environment. As space is a limited resource, the oilbird will vigorously defend their tiny patch of floor with a loud and aggressive snarling match, snapping their bill to drive away a competitor. But despite being fiercely territorial of their nesting space, they are highly cooperative when leaving the cave. At dusk, the colony leaves in massive synchronized waves. This group exodus is a social strategy called predator swamping, making it difficult for predators to target a single individual, and so protecting the group through sheer numbers. Once outside, they travel in loose vocal flocks. If one bird locates a heavily fruit-laden tree, its calls and movements alert nearby flock members, drawing the group to the food source. Oilbird chicks have an extremely unusual development in many ways. First, the time from egg to independence can last up to 150 days, an extremely long time for a tropical bird. Chicks are born blind and featherless, but during their time in the nest, they demonstrate social learning. Constantly surrounded by the cacophony of the colony, they use this time to listen to, mimic, and practice adult social calls, and the clicks required for echolocation. Both parents take an active role in caring for their chicks. They are fed an exclusive diet of lipid-rich fruits like avocados and oil palms. Because of this, the chicks gain an extraordinary amount of body fat. At its peak, the chicks can weigh up to 50 or 60% more than the adults. This is reinforced by their specialized digestive system, which evolved to retain food much longer than in other birds. This allows them to digest more of the oily fruits, absorbing up to 80% of the pure fats. This is an important part of their strategy, as an all-fruit diet is typically too low in protein for growing birds. Their unique digestive system allows them to extract far more energy from an otherwise nutrient-poor diet. While being fattened up, the chicks remain firmly rooted in their nest. Moving too far can trigger aggressive territorial attacks from neighboring birds, or cause the heavy chick to fall off the ledge to the cave floor, where it cannot survive. They reach their peak weight at around 70 days, after which they enter their weight loss fledgling phase. During their final month or so in the nest, the parents drastically cut back on feeding them, forcing the chicks to burn off their fat reserves, to grow feathers and drop down to adult weight before their first flight. This is important, as without this weight loss phase, the chick would be too heavy to fly. The fat storage in their chicks is actually the origin of the name oilbird. For centuries, indigenous peoples in South America harvested the plump nestlings directly from cave ledges using long poles. The captured chicks were boiled down in large pots to melt the heavy fat deposits, yielding a perfectly clear, odorless, and long-lasting oil. This was used as a premium oil for cooking or as fuel for lanterns and torches. Oilbird colonies single-handedly create their own forest in the pitch-black darkness of their caves. Known as a guano forest, the thousands of oilbirds in a colony create a constant rain of nutrient-rich droppings known as guano and regurgitated fruit pulp onto the cave floor. This constant rain of seeds from tropical palms, incense, and laurel trees will sprout inside the cave. Because of the lack of sunlight, these seedlings cannot photosynthesize. They grow into pale, ghostly white, spindly stalks up to several feet high, completely lacking chlorophyll. These plants survive purely on the energy stored inside the fruit seed itself. Once that limited energy is exhausted, the albino seedlings wither, rot, and die, creating a thick, decaying mat of organic matter that forms the base of the cave's food web. Although the plants themselves never survive, they transfer all of the energy stored within their seeds into the cave ecosystem. This massive carpet of rotting plant matter and bird waste supports incredibly dense populations of specialized scavengers and decomposers. Fungi and microbes carpet the cave floor, repeatedly breaking down the fat-filled organic waste. These are then covered with millions of tiny insects, guano moths and beetles, and giant crickets and cockroaches. These are then hunted by whip spiders, centipedes, and spiders. Many of these invertebrates are blind, using their enhanced sense of touch to navigate this lightless forest. Occasionally, snakes, crabs, or small mammals will enter from outside the cave, to feast on this veritable cornucopia. This unique ecosystem is, in some ways, quite similar to caves filled with bat guano, or even seabird colonies, but there are some important differences. The main one is the diet of the different animals involved. Oilbirds feed on fruits and seeds, leading to the guano forest. Bats that roost in caves, on the other hand, typically feed on insects, making their guano highly concentrated with ammonia and discarded insect exoskeletons. This leads to their caves teeming with flesh-eating beetles and ammonia-eating bacteria. They lack the plants that form the base of the food web in oilbird caves. Seabirds, on the other hand, nest in the open air. Feeding on seafood, they form crusty, calcified guano. This is a favourite of insects and can trigger enormous marine plankton blooms as it runs off into the ocean. But again, these colonies lack the lipid-rich guano found among oilbird colonies, leading to much less of a forest. The plants in seabird colonies are typically algae or grasses, and are usually found around the edges. They do not grow because of the guano. Oilbird caves are a microbiome, formed from an almost closed loop of energy recycling. The only outside source of energy is guano from oilbirds. This energy is largely retained within the cave ecosystem to feed the forest almost perpetually. For humans wishing to visit these guano forests, there are strict regulations. Some for the safety of the birds, and some for the safety of the visitors. For the visitors, the greatest danger is histoplasmosis, or cave disease. This is a serious lung infection caused by inhaling spores from the fungus Histoplasma capsulatum. This fungus thrives in damp environments rich in guano, the exact conditions found in oilbird caves. Scientists spending a lot of time researching in oilbird caves will wear tightly fitted respirator masks, disposable clothing, coveralls, and gloves. Before removing their mask, they are required to thoroughly wash their hair, bag, and clothes to avoid taking toxic spores outside the cave. For more casual visitors, they are typically restricted to the heavily ventilated cave mouth or early chambers, where the density of fungal spores is much lower. Keeping to paved pathways is also enforced, so tourists avoid kicking up hazardous, spore-laden dust into the air. As for the birds, they are incredibly sensitive to human disturbance. If scared away, they will abandon their nests, leaving their chicks to die. Tour guides carry specialized low-intensity, non-glare lamps to briefly illuminate pathways, while not casting harsh light up to the nesting birds above. Silence is another important rule for anyone wishing to visit an oilbird cave. Because the birds navigate caves using echolocation, and especially because the sounds they produce are in a similar range to human speech, talking humans can mask returning echoes, leading to the confused birds flying directly into cave walls. Oilbirds are considered least concern by the IUCN, but this rating is highly deceptive. Conservationists are deeply concerned about this highly unique species because this status is based on their large geographic range rather than their population security. Their largest threat is deforestation. Oilbirds have highly specialized feeding requirements. They require thousands of kilometers of intact forest with native lipid-rich incense, laurel, and palm fruits. But this means that they cannot adapt to agricultural land or pasture. Even if their nesting cave remains secure, the colony will starve if the surrounding foraging grounds are cleared. Because of their stable range and massive breeding populations, this gives them the illusion of security. However, their actual populations are highly concentrated. Cueva del Guacharo may be a large colony, but oilbirds still depend on a relatively small number of these breeding caves. Even local disturbances can therefore have disproportionate impacts on the global population. Actual data shows that oilbird populations are experiencing a steady, localized decline across South America due to the accelerating deforestation of the Amazon rainforest. Part of the reason their numbers may have historically seemed secure is that many oilbird colonies are tucked away in remote, unexplored mountain crevices. While this protected them temporarily, scientists note that logging and land clearing is destroying their foraging forests faster than researchers can discover many of the remaining colonies. A major concern if oilbirds do start disappearing is not even just for the species themselves. Oilbirds are an ecological keystone species. If they decline, then the guano forests will disappear as well, directly leading to the extinction of many species that are only found in these environments. Additionally, their wide-ranging foraging for fruit makes them an important seed disperser for the plants they feed on. Their disappearance may then lead to the collapse of many of the tree species they disperse, irrevocably changing the composition of the South American rainforest. The oilbird is unlike any other bird on Earth. It abandoned the daylight world of almost every other fruit-eating bird, replacing it with an extraordinary combination of smell, vision, echolocation, and cave life. In doing so, it didn't just carve out a unique ecological niche, it became an architect of an entire hidden ecosystem, one that depends on its continued survival. I hope you enjoyed this journey into the oilbirds. If you're interested in the research behind this episode, you can find a document with image credits and sources in the description below. These videos take a great deal of time and research to produce. They will always remain free to watch. But if you would like to support the channel and gain access to new videos a little earlier, you can find a link to my Patreon below as well. And to everyone who already supports the channel, thank you. Your support genuinely helps make these videos possible. If this video sparked your curiosity, don't let it stop here. Share it, talk about it, and keep learning. There's still so much to discover about the world's rare and remarkable species. And the more we understand, the better our chances of protecting them. Thanks for watching.